Hi, this is Chris Smith with Local Joe's. At Local Joe's, we help local business. Hi, this is Chris Smith with Local Joe's.
This is City Pulse Newsmakers, a weekly look at the issues and the people behind them in Greater Lansing. Brought to you by City Pulse, Lansing's weekly alternative newspaper. And now, here's your host, City Pulse publisher, Burl Schwartz.
Good morning. We have two guests today. Dr. PaulDeWeese is a physician and former state representative whose medical license has been suspended while the FBI and other agencies investigate his drug and pain treatment practice. And one of his, the people he was treating is with us as well, Jacob Burns. Thanks to both of you for being here today.
Thank you.
And here to also ask questions is Todd Haywood, has been covering the Paul DeWeese story for City Pulse. Dr. DeWeese, when we reported that your medical office had been raided, and subsequently when we reported that your medical license had been suspended, you declined to talk to us. Now you're willing to talk. Why have you changed your mind?
I think that on the one hand, there has to be some circumspection because the investigation is ongoing. It's possible they could launch criminal charges, we don't know, and so whatever I say can be used against me, and then you don't have access to your Fifth Amendment rights in certain circumstances, and that's really critical as you negotiate these kinds of charges that may be coming. They're just allegations right now. But I felt the way this was going, and especially the high-profile nature of the media, I just felt like it wasn't wise to just let the allegations be floating out there without having some coherent counteroffer of a perspective of, what are these allegations and what do they mean, and what's your perspective? So
you issued a press release that said either these allegations by the FBI that were in an affidavit are either wrong or grossly exaggerated.
Yes.
Can you talk about any of that?
Sure, some of that I can definitely talk about. For example, the one allegation is that I had kind of seduced drug-addicted women to come and live in my house, and I then prescribed medications to them, which I paid for, and in exchange they did certain personal services for me. The allegation comes out very strongly as if, number one, I'm seducing people to live with me for a specific purpose, which is to be an indentured servant to me, that I would capture them somehow in my house and they would then be forced to do certain services for me. This is absolutely, categorically false and intentionally pejorative. This is what the situation was. In about September of 2014, I was living with Dr. Greg Shannon. I was subleasing a bedroom from him. He was leasing the house. Subsequently, around that time, he chose to buy a house on Lake Lansing. So I had this house I didn't need, and I actually was praying about it, and I thought, maybe I ought to just stay here, and maybe I can make the house available for people that are in need. And so the first couple that came, they were living under the Kalamazoo Bridge, actually. They'd been living that outside for about a year, and they were patients, and so I said, you can come, stay with me. I'll give you the master bedroom, which I did. I moved out of the master bedroom, stayed in a smaller bedroom. Pretty soon, there were other people that came, some in toxic relationships where their lives were actually in danger. There was another one that actually Todd had interviewed yesterday. She came in, she was addicted to heroin. She was captured by a person who literally would rape her whenever he wanted sex. He would beat her, and then he would force her to have sex with multiple men every day for about a year and a half at that point, and had gotten her more addicted to heroin and provided that for her, and basically took all of the money that she earned for the cost of the heroin. So I rescued her and I brought her to my home. and now she's doing quite well. And there's a number of others, but either they were homeless, didn't have any place to stay, or they were involved in very damaging, toxic relationships. I gave them free rent. I gave them food free. Now, sometimes they'd use their bridge card, but a lot of times that didn't go enough, so I'd give them free food. Utilities free. I let them use my car with free gas so that they could go get their drugs, urines tested if they were under the court order, go to the drug court if they were in drug court, go to their counseling sessions. It is amazing what low-income people have to do when they're under the eyesight of the government. Many, many different meetings. Well, they got to take the bus, so I let them use my car. In exchange, I said, you don't have to do anything. Nothing. Nada. Sometimes they would say, hey, Dr. DeWeese, we'd like to make a meal for all of us. Is that okay? Or we're going to clean up the kitchen. Or do you need some errands done? Sure. We were living in community. But they did that out of the generosity of their heart. It was never a quid pro quo. For the FBI to assert what they know is false is pejorative and pathetic.
Jacob Burns, you were a patient of Dr. DeWeese's. What was he treating you for?
I have chronic lower back pain. I have 3 herniated discs. I got my own MRIs. I have beginning of my spinal canal is narrowing, sciatica really bad, and I got lots of anxiety going on right now, actually, but chronic pain. And I was being treated long before I seen Dr. DeWeese. I was actually led to him by my mother, who was a patient of his years ago when he worked at Hazel Primary Care, SEMA. Yeah. And that's how I was led to him.
One of the allegations is that Dr. DeWeese doesn't examine people, he just writes prescriptions. What was your experience?
That's not the case at all. I had to bring all my medical records with me. He ordered a new MRI, and you had to see every month. We took drug screens, pill counts. Nothing seemed on. I mean, he did everything that any other doctor would do that I've been through.
Todd?
Well, I was going to actually follow up with Dr. DeWeese. You talked about, you prayed about things after you sort of had this empty house.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about the role of your faith in developing this pain management practice that you developed?
Yeah, I can. For me, my faith kind of is a traditional Christian faith. I'm Catholic. But it's all about the notion that God is a God of redemption, that God is a God that especially cares about the disempowered, the impoverished, the poor, the people that aren't protected. So the narrative in the Old Testament is that God takes this tribal nation that's captured by Egypt and rescues them and brings them to a promised land. I mean, that's kind of the narrative. But the New Testament, they're filled with this notion that we, as a people of God, are to be about redemption. That is, we're to be about suffering with people. In fact, it's real interesting that the origin of the word compassion actually means to suffer with. That means to come alongside people. So in the traditional Good Samaritan story that's very famous, you have this non-Jewish man walking along the highway. He sees a Jewish man that's beaten and left to die by robbers, and he takes him, has compassion on him, puts him on his donkey, brings him to the hospital and says, I'm going to pay his bill. And then Jesus turns around and says, now, who's being the neighbor to this gentleman? Because before that, a priest had gone by and hadn't done anything, and they said, well, the person that took compassion, he says, go and do likewise. So the idea is to be aware of people that are in need and actually treat them as if they are God. There's a very famous passage in Scripture where Jesus is saying, blessed are you because you're going to enter the kingdom of God, because when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you came and provided clothes to me. When I was in prison, you came to visit me, And then the opposite was all these people that said, well, we cast out demons in your name and we did this and that. And he says, you stink, get out of here, because when I was hungry, you didn't do anything for me, So it's very kind of central to this idea of faith that we see people as kind of sacred. We see people created in the image of God that are truly our brothers and our sisters, and there is an inherent obligation not to turn, our eye and say, well, it's not my responsibility, because in a sense we are our brother's keeper. So my faith really is informed around that, and that's really why I started the practice, because there's so many people in pain and a lot of people in addiction, and they don't have access to treatment. There's a stigma attached to them. I think Jabe could probably explain that. If you go to the ER and you're in pain, you're treated like you're dirt. Most practices won't treat it. So there's a huge unmet need, and there's a stigma attached to a lot of these patients. And so I thought this is a great opportunity to really reach out and minister to people. On top of that, the idea of opening my home was a kind of a second tiered step, as it were, just saying, well, not only I'll treat you, but if you're really in need, I have a bedroom, you can have your private bedroom with a key, and you can come.
Is that explanation part of at least why you have traveled outside of Lansing to practice medicine?
Yes, it is. Burl, I've had really a wonderful opportunities in many ways. I've served. I taught Chinese university students in Taipei, Taiwan for a summer. I served in a hospital in Dugo, the Ivory Coast, for a summer. I was with Mother Teresa and her sisters, and there were actually men too that were working with her at that time. In Calcutta, India, I've been on an organization called the Nyaka AIDS Orphans Project in Uganda. I've gone there 3 times as a board member to serve people there. So yeah, all those were very much integral to this vision of, treating people with a sense of compassion and justice.
Now, some of your travels, though, the FBI has commented on in its affidavit, because they say that you've gone to the UP to write prescriptions. Tell us about that aspect of this.
Right. The UP, it's about a 7-hour trip. And so on July 4th weekend of last year, 2014, I elected to travel up to the Upper Peninsula to meet individually with about 12 patients and their families in their private home. I did that for a couple of reasons. Number one, they were having trouble just coming up with a cost, sometimes of the gasoline and being away from work and everything. So I said, I'm going to come. Secondly, it's well established in medicine that if you can do a home visit, you learn a lot about the patient. You learn about their environment, you learn about other people that are living there. Is it a clean home? Is it messy? You learn a lot about patients. Third reason was I wanted to meet the parents, because a lot of times parents were frustrated with the addiction of their children, and they sometimes saw any kind of treatment as just another, crutch that they didn't respect very much. So it was to educate the parents, but also then to maybe get them, in certain circumstances, to control the medicine of their children and then kind of dish it out each day for them, which is very helpful in certain circumstances. You've got a person that's addicted, they have a problem with impulse control, and if you have parents kind of controlling the medicine and giving it to them each day, it can be very helpful from a therapeutic standpoint. That was my goal. That's exactly what I did in individual homes with parents. What it got reported was that I drove up to the Upper Peninsula, drove, quote, and I'm quoting now, massive prescriptions of pain medicine out of my car. Untrue, categorically false, pejorative.
Why do you think this is happening?
It's a good question. I think that in our practice, we've discharged 240 patients. Now, that has never been brought up by the FBI, because it's against their narrative. The narrative is, I'm just dishing out pills like crazy, giving them to drug dealers, and I don't care about anything. The fact that I would have discharged 240 patients, many of them who we caught selling their prescriptions, and that's why we discharged them, is kind of against the whole grain. But the point I'm making is that out of the 240, about 40 were very angry and came back at us and said things like, I'm bringing a shotgun, I'm going to blow your staff away. I'm going to call the FBI, I'm going to lie about you. I'm going to bring you down. I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to get your license taken away as a vindictive mood. Not once in the whole 40-plus page document did the FBI ever indicate that this person was discharged from our practice and threatened us with this kind of information because it was against their narrative.
Jacob, I see you nodding your
Yeah,
head yes.
I can attest to that. Actually, I witnessed it one time happening. I don't know. It was a woman that drove up, and she owed him money because he wasn't in it for the money. He shot, and she owed, I don't know, was it $400? And her drug screens weren't clean, and she paid the $400 and was discharged. And she was screaming at the top of her lungs to get her money back. She called the police. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It held up the whole day, and I'm calling. And that's exactly what he said. I'm
Yeah.
calling the FBI. I'm calling this. I'm calling that. I'm not because they drove a long ways and obviously weren't following the program.
Todd?
Well, I was going to ask, sort of following up, you talked about how patients are struggling to get access to pain care and pain management, which is part of the reason why you stepped up.
Right.
So I was going to ask Jacob about his experiences going to the emergency room as somebody with chronic pain, and what are those experiences like?
Well, first I called McLaren to even ask before I'd even waste my time, and they said, sure, come and see us, we'll do something for you. And I get there, and they said they are new regulations, they're not allowed to treat chronic pain from the emergency room. And they're treating us all like we were just drug addicts, basically. And I called several doctors' offices. There's at least a 6-month backup. When I called my primary care, they said, well, our pain clinic, McLaren one's backed up 6 months, so you better get into detox. That's basically what they tell you. I have 2 jobs. I have 3 kids to take care of. What am I supposed to do? Luckily, I went
Would you
to
be able to work without pain medication?
It'd be tough. It'd be tough. It'd be tough.
And what would the quality of your life be like?
It's going downhill right now because, I mean, I'm not a medical professional. I'm trying to stretch them out. I've been up and down, just trying to make them last. And one place in town that I think it was only because they know I didn't abuse my pills. I've been going to the same pharmacies or whatnot, the same doctor, and she actually must have knew you personally and gave me a little relief until I had to have a pain appointment in place, which I went to today, and they're not helping us. They're basically, if we were seeing, they're charging you $300 for a 1 8-milligram strip a day of Suboxone. That's all they offer me for my back pain.
You know, one of the things that has surfaced, I think, finally in the media is this chronic problem, perhaps an epidemic, that the country and certainly locally we are facing with pain pills on the street, with heroin overdoses. As Todd reported, in the city of Lansing alone, so far this year, there have been 7 deaths from heroin overdoses, more than the last 2 years combined. How rare is it becoming for a doctor to even treat people in pain or who are drug addicts?
I think it's quite rare. The concern, there are a couple of things. One is there's, if I can use the word idiocy, it's not idiocy, but idiocy. When I get my license, well, I have to get a special X number that permits me to prescribe Suboxone for office-based treatment for heroin addiction. When I get that, the government says, the first year you get this license, you can treat 30 patients at one time. That's it. Now, after you do that for 1 year, you can see 100 patients at one time, and that's it. I mean, can you imagine a thoracic surgeon getting out of his residency and the government saying, well, you can only do 100 surgeries this year? You know, you've got this massive need, and so if you're going to do something and you like it and you want to get good at it, you need to do it, you know, a lot. But they limit it, so you can't have a practice of only treating 100 patients. So you do it with a lot of other things, whatever you're doing, and so a lot of physicians that even get this don't even use it because it takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort to get to know this patient population. The addicted community is a community that's used to conniving, they're used to stealing, they're used to lying, That's how they get on with their life. And so they interface the physician. It's a challenge.
And why are we seeing this sharp increase in the last year or two?
Yeah, I really believe, and this is, I appreciate the question because I think this is so critical. As physicians are being targeted as if they are the problem for the diversion of drugs, more and more physicians are refusing to treat pain. Todd, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you were to call 20 family practice doctors in the greater Lansing area right now, I bet you wouldn't get one. They'd say, well, what do you want to see the doctor for? Well, I have chronic back pain. I've been treated for, well, I'm sorry, we don't do that here. So what happens, because they're scared of being raided by 25 armed federal agents, right? So the patient then goes to the street, and the drug dealer says, yeah, we've got some pills here, but they're pretty expensive, but heroin's cheap. It's a lot cheaper than pills. But it's laced sometimes with other things, and so then there's overdoses and deaths and things like that. And when you have those people kind of flooding the street market because they can't get their legitimate pain needs met or their addiction needs met, you drive up demand for heroin. So we're seeing dramatic increases in supply of heroin, dramatic overdoses, dramatic increases in deaths. And I think it's because, in part at least, the way that we're approaching the physician community is that the physicians are the chief problem, and they're going after us with the full force and power of the federal government, and almost as if we're guilty before we're even, engaged. The appeal that I would have is if the government is concerned about a particular practice, I don't understand why they can't just come to us and say, hey, we've got some concerns. Let's look at the data. Let's look at what's going on. Let's see if we can establish some guidelines from your practice that we would feel comfortable with and still let you treat the needs in our community. But they don't do that. They send in secretive patients to see if they can catch you, And it's 20 years in prison and $500,000 fines and triple damages and let's put your name on the paper. We're going to take your license away from you because you're an awful doctor. It's just the way that they approach this is awful. And it's not just awful. The issue is not here me as a victim. And that's not the point. The point I'm making is that it ripples through the community. And we've had a lot of patients call our office and say, I can't believe what happened. But my doctor, who I've been with for 12 years, just sent me a letter and says, as of this date, we are no longer prescribing any Schedule II narcotics. That's our policy now.
Todd?
Yeah, I was going to actually follow up. We talk about people having to turn to the streets for the sort of street pharmacy. You're struggling. Is that something that has crossed your mind?
It's not an option. I can't do that. I got responsibilities to my children, and that's probably the only reason I'm staying afloat is because I wasn't one of the ones abusing my pills, and it's a shame that we get caught up because a couple bad apples that he discharges. I've called same thing numerous ones. They don't treat it here. Oh, you gotta see here. You need an internist. I called a pain doctor I've seen before. He said everyone's too scared to do anything. There's no money in it. It's too high risk, and they basically tell you to deal with it, more or less. That's it. That's all I've been getting lately. I've called numerous doctors, and they don't treat it. They ask, what's your issue? What drugs are you on? Nope. And then to get a referral, which I've been trying to do, that's another story, because all the referrals are backed up at least 6 months. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I guess I have another appointment at MSU Internal Medicine. We'll see what they can do for me, but I think they have the same approach. I don't know. We'll find out. But no, what he's saying is right. You can call every PCP. They are not treating it at all.
Dr. DeWeese, isn't refusing to provide medically necessary treatment a violation of the Hippocratic Oath?
Yeah, I would think so. And if I can take a little diversion, what was interesting to our staff and to me is that you get notified your license has been immediately suspended. What that means is that they are forcing you to break the Hippocratic Oath that says you do not abandon your patients. It's always been the case that if you're going to be going on vacation, if you're going to retire, you let your patients know ahead of time so they can see. You don't just abruptly stop care, but that's what they did in this case. But the ideology is that all these people are drug seekers. That's the pejorative. They're all drug seekers. It's too risky to treat them, and so we just, so we have chosen as a practice not to treat them. With the idea, well, they can go someplace else. Well, they can go someplace else, but there's no other place for the people to go. And I'm telling you that, I just think that, the Institute for Medicine, I was 6 years ago or something, they came out and they said, chronic severe pain is an epidemic in America, and it's undertreated, So we have people that are living, but their lives are truncated. In other words, it dramatically affects their ability to be with their grandchildren, go on a vacation, enjoy life, work productively without severe pain, So there's this kind of soft underbelly in our society, I think, where there's lots of unmet needs, and we've got this system that's kind of impacted by a law enforcement community that is, not, I think, interacting with the physician community well. And there's no, in my view, very few people talking about the impact of that in terms of other physicians because of the fear that they have of being investigated. They're charged.
We have about 2 minutes to go. Lieutenant Governor Calley is leading a task force right now that touches on many of these issues. What are your thoughts on that task force?
Well, first of all, I think, on the one hand, it's good, I think, that they want to raise the issue. We'll see what those recommendations are. But when I went to testify before the task force, I was talking to some of my former legislative colleagues, and they talked about one of the avenues that they were thinking that they were going to recommend out of the task force was we're going to go get these bad doctors again. So it seems like the extant kind of mode of operation is we're going to correct this problem by going after these bad doctors that are writing these prescriptions, but they don't understand.
So they have a black and white view.
Exactly, and I don't think that they're seeing the catastrophic effect that's having socially on physicians' willingness to treat the legitimate pain needs of their patients. And it's driving people to the street, which is driving up demand for pills and heroin.
We just have about a minute to go. How are you coping with all of this? You can't practice medicine, you can't make a living.
Right, I can't make a living. I'm actually having to, for the first time in my life, dip into my 401k plan. It's much earlier than I thought I was going to have to do that, but the legal bills are very high, and I think this is something that's not recognized. Last month, I spent $25,000 in the month of July 2015 to engage this battle, and it's just beginning.
Yes, it's just beginning. Well, you are, I presume, expecting charges. Do you think that's going to happen?
I think probably, there'll be some kind of negotiation and all that. So, but I think
how are you going to react?
Well, I think that the question is, how do you negotiate that? What are they going to offer? But I think we can win this based on the testimony of patients and things like that.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, Dr. DeWeese, for being on.
Sure.
And Jacob Burns, best of luck to you. I hope this program helps get you the help that you need. And Todd, thanks so much for being here. You can continue to read about this story in City Pulse. I'm Burl Schwartz. We'll see you next week.